This
There we
meeting.
go.
Here we go.
Success.
Okay.
Get that out of there so I don't inadvertently
Oh, I'm just going to admit a few more people who are in the waiting room. We'll just let her get settled. Eleanor, welcome. And I think we're ready. We're ready to go. And I want to welcome everybody. This is our very first, our inaugural online event for this pilot project we're running called the Seniors Centre Without Walls. And we received a grant from the United Way to do this video and phone-based events that people can participate in from home. So thank you all for being here. I'm reading from my notes, so I'm not going to be looking at the camera the whole time. And today we have Jenny Millar interviewing her mother, Isabel Tipton. But before we go into that, I just wanted to go over just a few Zoom housekeeping items that the meeting's being recorded. And for those who want to watch later online, we'll be posting it on our website. And I'll ask you to keep your mic on mute during the interview. And then after the interview, there'll be, after about a half an hour, an opportunity to ask questions of Jenny and Isabel, or to have your own memories and comments. Or you can post something in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. And I'm going to now turn it over to the Metchosin Seniors Association Vice Chair, Helen Fletcher, who's going to introduce our guests.
Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce Isabel Tipton, an illustrious Metchosin pioneer, and her daughter, Jenny Millar. And I want to thank Isabel and Jenny very much for agreeing to participate in the launching of our Senior Centre Without Walls project. You're a pioneer. We named this session Footprints of Isabel Tipton, and Isabel aptly pointed out that the book Footprints, do you remember it? Came out in 1983 and recounted the history of pioneer families of Metchosin and was edited by her mother, Marian Helgeson. Isabel and her family's lived experience covers a long span and many facets of Metchosin's history. Isabel's involvement and commitment to this community is extensive and varied, and includes the Metchosin School Museum, St. Mary's Church, many horticultural activities, including the founding of the Horticultural Center of the Pacific. And she's also been a founding member of many of the fine art initiatives in Metchosin, including Metchosin International Summer School of the Arts and the Consider the Lilies annual fabric show. When I was first introduced to the Tiptons in the late 1970s, Jenny was attending Camosun College studying applied communications, and she was working at Monday Magazine. So we are putting her investigative journalism skills to the test. And I'm very curious to hear the stories that she gets her mother to divulge. So Jenny and Isabel, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. So we are going to hear about some things that Mom remembers. And if we skip over something and refer to it and you don't understand where we mean, let us know by the chat. And Lori will ask us to, clarify what we mean. And I think we're going to start with what you remember about animals when you were a child in Metchosin. What was here?
Horses, work horses. My Uncle Tom had a tractor, but I don't remember anybody else having one as early. And there were teams of work horses, the Weirs and the Pears. And there was still a certain amount of horse logging going on. There was a gentleman named Saint Pierre who horse logged up till sometime in the late 60s anyway. And Ray Creaser, who should probably be the next person on this list, could tell you more about the logging side of things. There weren't many saddle horses. Bob Whitty rode a horse. And later on, a lady named Mrs. Morant, who lived down on William Head Road, rode a horse. They would ride the horse up to the store and tether it outside and go in and do their shopping. And then there was a lot of dairy farming. And most families either had an arrangement with a farmer with a cow or had a cow. Everybody had a dog and a cat, but there weren't the horses for pleasure that there are now.
And what were your chores like when you were little that you remember?
Oh, gather the eggs. One of my first assignments that I remember was to follow hen turkeys who had escaped the pen and figure out where they were laying. And I was deputed to watch the turkey and find the nest so the eggs could be brought in and incubated. Turkeys are not the most dedicated mothers. And we had greater success with the incubator than with the turkey hen. But I remember that, following them through the snowberries, finding the nests. And whatever needed doing, the usual household chores, make your bed and help with the dishes. But the chickens, the birds were more my responsibility.
Going to school here, what do you remember?
I started school in September of 1940. The war was in progress. But the early childhood education consisted of the June before you started school, you went to school for half a day with your older sibling or the kids next door or somebody to get the feel of the place. But we walked to school. I don't recall anybody being driven. We had to watch out for the army traffic on William Head Road. We walked down Lombard and along William Head to school. And there were the two of us to begin with, my older brother Wally and myself, and our cousins from across the road, the Tom Helgeson family.
So who was that?
Ray, Norman, Eileen would be starting when Eileen and I are the same age. And then we picked up various kids along the way. But the school was one room. It was the large room that the outside staircase leads to now. It had been built in 1914. There were 54 children, 8 grades, 1 teacher, and 4 grade 9s doing correspondence in the corner. And Miss Wilkin managed. I don't quite know how. Today's teachers would have a fit. 8 grades and 54 kids and a variety of abilities. And she managed. She had marcelled hair, think the Duchess of Windsor in the 1930s, and heels that high. I'll swear they were that high. And it was the first person I ever remember seeing with high heels. I didn't move, and I moved in country circles. There was the boys' staircase and the girls' staircase. There were 2 outhouses. There was a wood and coal furnace in the basement, and a janitor by the name of Mr. Milstead, who lived at the bottom of the big hill on William Head, started it in the morning and came up at noon and shuffled around.
And when you left Metchosin School, where did you end up?
I was in the 1st grade of Belmont. In 1946, BC consolidated the school districts, and all the little schools were roped into school districts. And Metchosin had Metchosin School. There was a school at William Head where there were 3 or 4 kids in. It was then the Dominion Quarantine Station, not the jail. There was Rocky Point, East Souk, and off and on Albert Head. Albert Head School was condemned in 1936 for an occupancy of 15. But in 1946, into it moved 30 grade 9s and 1 teacher. And these were all the grade 9s west of Parsons Bridge. Clarence Creaser and Elsie Thornett, and I think Bill Emonson came from either Rocky Point or East Souk. Ray would have to correct me there. And there were several from Langford and Happy Valley and Colwood and Metchosin. And there was a pocket-sized schoolyard. And finally, we got permission to use one of the fields on the Albert Head Army camp for baseball after about 4 people got seriously injured, but either by a flung bat or a ball hitting them that they couldn't, we were pretty thick on the ground. And we're still friends, some of us from those days.
So when the war broke out, what changed in Metchosin?
The young men left. The army moved in. There was an army camp at Mary Hill. There were soldiers at William Head, Albert Head, and I think Church Hill, certainly the top of it had an outlook post. And there were soldiers at Souk, and they used to go on route marches. You would often see a platoon or whatever marching down the road. And they cut through our farm and persisted in leaving gates open until we finally got organized which gates were to be left open and which were shut. Because by the time the tail of the marching unit got there, it was at a different gate than they had opened, and they closed the wrong one, sort of thing. Sick of fetching cows. And they lent the army out to the farmers during the harvest, because everybody's sons or hired men or whoever had helped them was off to war. And after, I'm not sure whether it was just after they shelled Estevan Point or whether before, there was a blackout. And there were ARP wardens, and I looked up the ARP. It was air raid protection. I thought maybe it was prevention, but air raid protection wardens who wandered around and came and knocked on the door if your blackout wasn't perfect. And
So what would you do in your house to do the blackout?
oh, black cloth was tacked over the windows or over the blinds or whatever, and any room that was going to have a light in it had to have that done before dark.
I do. What, no, I can't remember what I was
Yeah.
gonna say, sorry.
Kids had the run of the district, provided you left gates as you found them, didn't harass the livestock and didn't break down fences. You could go just about anywhere. And I remember several springs, my brothers and I used to go down what was then the tracks to what is now the Zodiac subdivision, and then was an old growth forest on the rocks, and it was Weir property, and we were allowed to ramble through there. And I discovered years later that the Creaser kids had done the same thing from their end, but we never met up. I don't know quite why. We rode our bikes everywhere, except there weren't any new bikes. This was wartime. And they were building tanks and planes, not kids' bicycles. So most of the bicycles were elderly rattle traps that the boys learned to mechanic fairly well and fairly early, because my only bicycle that I actually owned was a secondhand one from a girl named Patsy Purdy, who had graduated to a slightly better used bicycle.
So fix it and hand me down, or
Yeah. Yes. And no, children's clothes were almost unobtainable. Now and then Eaton's or Spencer's, I guess it was then, would get in something, some garment that the news went through the district like wildfire that they had it, and people would try and acquire some. But there were ration books, of course.
what was a big event that you can remember when you were little? It was very exciting. It might not happen now.
All Soup Day.
All Soup Day? Well, what was it, the first year or the second year? You were the baby?
I don't know when Soup Day started, All Soup Day started, but yeah, but the last All Soup Day I really remember, I was 25, and my brother and I went, and my cousin Harry was the master of ceremonies, always, Mr. Souk. And he decided that the ladies should have a tug of war team. And there was a Souk tug of war team. But there wasn't anybody challenging them. So Harry announced, there's my cousin down there. She'll organize a team. So I had to round up people, and we were soundly beaten by the Souk tug of war team, since none of us had ever tried it before.
Well, did you play organized sports at all, or what were?
No, there
Just
wasn't any
all pick up?
organ- well, the school teams, but there wasn't anything remotely approaching Little League. My younger brother played lacrosse in his teens. By then there was a lacrosse thing going in town, not out our way. There weren't enough kids to make it practical, I guess. We fished and we rode our bikes and we spent the summers at either Weir's Beach or Whitty's Lagoon.
And what did you do on a Saturday morning? What did a young lady in the Chosen do on a Saturday morning?
Chores.
What
What else?
did you have classes? Did you go to a class?
I went to ballet class at one stage of the game. A lady named Madame Benoit, who was a retired ballerina and lived in the house that the Nelsons and later the Pledgers lived on. Just at the bottom of the hill on Duke Road, before you turn left along the beach, there's an old brown and white house. And Joan Clapham and I were her senior students, and we used to bicycle down there and do ballet for an hour and bicycle home.
You didn't do embroidery?
Mrs. Bolton, there was what was called the Junior WA.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Bolton rounded up the girls, the elementary school girls, and we were taught to embroider. And this again was wartime. If you lost a pin or a needle, you hunted till you found it. And most of these classes were outside on the vicarage lawn. And trying to find a needle on the vicarage lawn is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But that was what we did. And Mrs. Weir taught music she taught music to my father's generation, piano, and she taught piano to my generation.
Yeah, I don't know what else.
One story I was thinking of last night that nobody would believe unless they were there. During the early years of the war, again, I guess after the Japanese shelled Estevan Point, the powers that be got worried about we might be bombed. And so the air raid siren would go and the children would march in an orderly manner from the school over under the trees where the cafe now is. And we would lie down on our tummies with our hands behind on our necks. And I can't think it was the RAF, but somebody dropped 25-pound sacks of 5 Roses flour in the schoolyard. And it actually happened. That was our preparation for
Your
war.
emergency preparedness
Yeah.
thing.
But I can still remember that and thinking, what a waste of flour.
Well, that's kind of the thought that went through my mind when you said that. You know, characters that were around that probably were.
Bob Whitty. Bob Whitty was an old man by the time I was a little girl. But Bob had driven 10 mule trains on the Caribou Road when he was in his early teens. And I always felt that was a real link with history. And Bob was, I don't know whether kids were scared of him. I certainly wasn't, because we knew him quite well. But he wore a white cowboy hat and a blue shirt and a red neckerchief and jeans. And he rode a horse everywhere. He had Diamond and Dixie. And the one I remember the most is Molly. Molly was a buckskin mare who came to live at our place for 6 months between being owned by the Whitty brothers, because Bill and Bob were not speaking at the time. And Bob couldn't possibly buy a horse from Bill. But my father could buy one from Bill and later on sell it to Bob. So Molly was around for years. She was a very nice horse.
Tell us a bit about where things were on the farm, on the property. Like Lombard was your driveway.
Yeah. The house at the top that's now behind the fake stone fence was where I lived as a child. The barn was dead east, straight line between the house and Sherwood Creek, and the barn was there. And my grandmother lived in a cottage at the end of Tavan Road. The water came from the spring at the top of Lombard and was piped to the dairy and to a water bucket barrel outside the house when I first remember, but it came inside the house not long after that. And then the feds put the water line through to William Head, and the people along were allowed to tap into it. And about that time, we got power too. But the milk was, we had a milking machine, but there were some cows that had to be hand milked and some that had to be hand stripped. And the milk was taken down to the dairy and run through a cooler, which was the water ran down both sides of a sort of a corrugated steel, it looked like, affair, and put into 20-gallon cans and was collected and delivered to the creamery. The creamery came around, and once a month the gentleman came and tested the cows for TB, because that was still, wasn't long since TB had been
Very big threat.
yeah, a considerable threat in the dairy industry. And,
So what did you grow on the farm besides cows and chickens?
corn.
Where was the corn?
Uh,
I remember you telling me the
Down-
home field.
down the Lombard, and if you're going down Lombard, turn left. The top field was corn. There was hay. There was a lot of hay. There were mangels. We had a large vegetable garden. And there was a clamp in the hillside where potatoes and turnips and things were kept for the winter. And vegetables and fruits were canned or bottled, you know, not canned. And it was the law of the Medes and the Persians that you boiled all canned vegetables for 10 minutes, because home canned vegetables were still considered to be a serious cause of botulism. And I just remember that by the time they'd been canned and
Oh.
boiled 10 minutes, I don't think there was a vitamin left,
No.
but they had a bit of color. My Helgeson grandmother used to can venison. They didn't have freezers, of course, and you either smoked it or you canned it, and the family preferred it canned. And that too was heated to boil it before you ate it, just in case. But I do remember bottled blackberries, who seemed to, the seeds multiplied during the process. My younger brother loved them.
Oh,
Yeah,
no, oh. Might as well just make cordial.
well, that wasn't an option.
No. So who did the hunting?
Oh, my father, my brothers later on.
When did they get to go do that? What was it?
My older brother got a 22 for his 10th birthday and wasn't allowed to take it out with other kids, only by himself.
Sensible, yeah.
Yes, no, that is not. But that was standard then, that the more responsible boys got a 22 for their 10th birthday. And
What did the girls get for their 10th birthday? Or was that the bicycle?
no, I don't remember.
Oh, nothing is
I don't,
significant.
nothing is significant. I don't remember. We spent our summers as middle-sized children and young teenagers before you got a job at Whitty's Lagoon. And that was wonderful. You do your chores in the morning and make a lunch and pack it up in a paper bag and get on your bicycle, which you left at the top of the stairs, and fetch up at Whitty's Lagoon. There were a whole raft of kids. When the tide was out, you played prisoner's base on the sand. When the tide came in, you swam in the channel. And in the evening, as you got older, you were allowed to swim at the falls. The pool at the bottom of Sitting Lady Falls is the best swimming hole in the entire world, as far as I'm concerned.
Me too, only we can't do it now. Could when I was a teenager.
Well, it took you once,
Yes.
and we got yelled at. And I remember one of my lippier children saying, "We're not swallowing it, we're swimming in it," when somebody yelled at us that we'd get deathly ill from swallowing the water.
We went, yeah.
But
no.
you picked a rock, the suitable height, and dove in. The only person that went from the far side was Bernie Whitney Griffiths, who was an absolute daredevil in his teens. The rest of us weren't nearly as brave.
Some of the memories of some of the families that people might read about in Footprints or.
Well, the Weirs lived down the road,
Yes.
and we'd been friends for generations. And I remember somebody trying to introduce me to Anne Stewart, who was a sprig of the Whitty family. And Anne saying, "Oh, we've been friends for generations."
Yes.
But one of the real characters was a British aristocrat named Lady Emily Walker, who lived at the farm called Ragley on East Souk Road. And Lady Emily was a force to be reckoned with. She came to see, she brought Wallace figs when he was born. And Mother had never had a fresh fig before. Wallace was born in August. I was born in May, and apparently Lady Emily arrived to visit Mother in hospital and see the baby. And Lady Emily arrived before the babies had been taken back to the nursery. Well, you didn't stop, Lady Emily, or at least no student nurse was going to. And she marched in and inspected the baby. My father came in and somebody arrived trying to take the baby back to the nursery. Oh, nonsense. She hasn't met her father yet. So I was handed to my father. And Miss Rossiter, who was head nurse there and was a dear friend of my cousin Irene, came in to demolish everybody and gave up. And said, oh, all right.
We'll go with the flow.
Yes, there's no other cause. But Lady Emily had a fearsome reputation. She used to walk from East Souk down to Taylor Road to catch the bus to town. I remember seeing her. You must have seen her go by, right? But she certainly was one of the neighborhood characters. But there were a lot of very poor people. None of us had any money. This was the tail end of the Depression in the farming community. But I think there were probably elderly people who lived on very, very little, but what they could catch or grow. Because there just wasn't money in Metchosin in those days.
So the main roads at that time were what?
Happy Valley and Metchosin. And Happy Valley was the road of choice on bad mornings in the winter because Millbank Hill, which was at the far end of Duke Road and has since vanished totally, was too steep. But people didn't feel their vehicles would do it. So they did Happy Valley. And the train was still running on the Goose.
Tell us about what you remember. I only remember a small bit when I was a little girl and the Brousseaus in the house
Yeah.
and coming up, walking up with you to watch the train go by.
Yeah, yeah. And we used to put pennies on the track and get them flattened out. Our parents didn't approve of this. Why they thought a penny was going to derail a train, I really don't know. And there was between Taylor and Lombard on the Goose, there is what is now a swamp, but then was known as the Frog Pond. And we used to roll railroad ties down there and make rafts. And the Brousseau kids were in on it. So Mr. Brousseau was the section foreman. So we didn't get into serious trouble for that.
What happened when it was wintertime with that pond? Did you skate?
No, it was there wasn't enough. There wasn't anything much bigger than half this room. No, there was a pond up at the top of the hill on Rocky Point. And I remember the boys skating there. I never had skates, but they had managed skates from somewhere. But there was one winter when I was maybe grade 3 or 4, there was snow that lasted a long time. And as a sign of times that have gone, the whole school chose sides. The 2 biggest boys were captains. And we had a 2-week-long snowball fight in the schoolyard with official permission.
Well, we did here when I was going to Metchosin school, but Mary Jane, my granddaughter, they're not allowed to make snowballs at all. They can slide down the hill at Hans Helgeson, but that's it. And only approved sleds.
Dear goodness.
I know.
What is an unapproved sled?
I think the big wooden ones, the ones that have runners that are
Oh.
sharp. Yes.
But
She's very frustrated with not being able to make a snowball.
Yeah.
No.
it's not
And they
fun.
don't even make snowmen.
Really?
And that was the other thing that the 2 biggest boys, by the time Metchosin School had 3 houses, Bilston, Sherwood, and Cole,
Mhm.
and it was teams for snowball fights behind walls that you had to build. The little kids had to build the walls, or the tallest snowman. And I remember Tony Geekus and well, I can't remember who else. Probably a Whitney Griffiths and somebody else.
Yes. Standing
On
on each
top of
other's
shoulders to make the tallest snowman. Yes.
think kids are overprotected these days compared to you lot. We had total freedom. You had a little less. She had to be home by dark. There was one year when she only got out on Mondays, because Mondays she would sin and come home late on her pony and be grounded the rest of the week.
Pretty much. But the Goose was not a trail. It was still the railroad tracks. And I had a pony that loved to run them. She could run in between the railings, the ties, and just run. And it was fun.
Hmm.
Yeah. What about farming equipment that kids used? Did kids get to do like
Boys could run the tractor by the time they were 10 or 12. My cousin Norman was.
as long as they had long enough legs, which was no
Yeah.
problem for the cousin
And
Norman.
the safety devices on today's machines weren't there. You know, you didn't have to be a certain weight. And Wally drove the team. The team wouldn't have disobeyed anything for all the tea in China, so he was in no danger, but he did. And his first job after my father died, the first time I remember him earning money, he drove our team for Bill Whitty haying. And I don't know, as I say, I think we had a lot more freedom. And I don't remember people coming to grief particularly. There weren't many broken bones. We climbed trees and fished in ponds.
Was there a community doctor or?
There was
Where
Dr.
did you-
Jenkins at the quarantine station in case of emergency. Other than that, it was town.
And how many families were there families living at the quarantine station?
Yes, there were probably, I don't know, there were the engineers for the boat, the people who ran the boat, the doctor, 2 or 3 others that I never knew quite what they did, and the lighthouse keeper at the point. That was the roadies. Kathleen Roadie was in my grade in school. I don't remember what Margaret Taylor's parents did. I just don't. But they did something, or one of them did something down there.
And what was out at Rocky Point at that time?
People.
And so did the kids from,
Well, there's one of the kids from
Well,
Rocky Point.
yes, I know, right,
there on the
but-
screen.
but what I'm getting at is when I was little, there were military families who
Yeah.
would come and stay for a couple of years and then they were gone.
No, it was a farming community. There were Parkers and there were various people. And there was a book which I will try and figure out, and a gentleman who lived in one of the cottages on Imdyke Passage looking across to Bentic Island, which was a leper colony then, wrote about his life there. And it escapes me. I remember there was one, but I can't remember the name of either the book or the author. But there were quite a few people lived out there. The Hunter Millar, who lived the bottom of Swanwick Road and what was known as the Big House, I think had a farm out there. And there were at least 2 families of Parkers and Balls and I don't know who all else, but there was a school there. But when the government expropriated it in late 40s, early 50s, everybody had to move out. And one year I was enumerating for the election, and Ottawa was well behind the times, and their map of Rocky Point showed all the houses and all the people on it. And of course, there was nobody there to enumerate, and you couldn't get in anyhow. But
Oh, well,
I kept getting these communications from Ottawa that I hadn't enumerated my whole district, and very difficult to make them understand that their map was about 30 years out of date. And there were some lovely old trees out there. And one of the best viewpoints in the world, I don't think was on the Rocky Point property. I think it was on the Beecher Bay Reserve number 2 property. It was the top of Church Hill, next land, Japan.
So did Metchosin have lots to do with Beecher Bay at all, community, when you were a kid?
Not that much. Again, it was a long way away.
Right.
And some families had cars, some didn't. Some traveled by the veteran stages. And I don't think many of the Beecher Bay people had vehicles then either. But now and then somebody would come to the door selling fish.
And the Women's Institute at and Metchosin Farmers Institute, which is in Happy Valley.
Yeah.
And the memorial over at the church, the cenotaph.
That's
Remember about those?
well, the play school, the room that's the play school now, was an army hut from Mary Hill when they took the huts down and sold them off. There are 3 or 4 houses in the Western community that started off as an army hut from Mary Hill. And that was a war memorial hall. It was done by the Legion, provided the manpower and the money to move it up and set it up. And it was known as the War Memorial Hall for years, and then the Memorial Hall, and now it's known as the Playground.
Yeah.
But the basis of it is an old army hut.
Do you remember what you went to as a kid there?
No, not Sunday school, it was beyond it by then. They used to have whist parties. And my mother would round up all suitable children and take them, and you played whist. And there was the odd party held there that somebody wanted to have a party and the house wasn't big enough. And there was always the Lily Luncheon, which was run by the ladylike side of Metchosin. Little girls had to wear dresses to serve tea, dresses and aprons. And everybody had a fancy apron as well as their everyday apron.
And this is what you worked on Saturday mornings with your needlework, was your fancy apron, or no?
Heavens no.
No.
I hemmed pillowcases. I learned to hem stitch from Mrs. Bolton.
So that was something useful then.
I don't know, but I can't think the last time I hem stitched anything. But I could if I had to.
So after Albert Head School, where did you end up?
We're out of
Close.
Belmont, the army huts, the first year of Belmont, when they had to send us all home because the plumbing froze, the heating system didn't work, and there was no insulation. We had classes for a couple of days outside. I remember Mr. Parrott lining us all up on a telephone pole teaching. I see a nod there. Somebody else remembers that. But when the toilets froze, they decided that we had to have a few days off till they got things sorted out. And you picked rocks off the playground. I mean, the playground was dangerous. So we picked rocks and picked rocks and picked rocks. It was pulling broom at Metchosin. It was picking rocks at Belmont. Slave labor was not unknown.
Did you have Christmas concerts at Metchosin School?
Yes, we did.
And what did you do in those? Or do you
Got one side of
remember?
my hair burnt off.
What?
I was the spirit of Christmas past, and the candle caught my hair. And I remember
Oh.
Mrs. Brusso slapping it out and shoving me out on stage. Smoke ascending and a great smell of burning hair. I don't remember any more about it than that. Yes, we did. We had Christmas concerts. And we had Christmas parties in the community hall. And I can't think who sponsored them. But all the little kids got a present. And Mr. Milstead, the school janitor, was Santa Claus. I remember that distinctly. It's when I stopped having faith in Santa Claus.
No,
And it was so obviously Mr. Milstead.
I see. Yes, I'm not sure what else. It looks like we're just about out of time. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Just what a sort of a caring, friendly place it was. If a kid came to grief, whatever parent was closest picked it up and patched it up and made sure it got home. And my brothers delivered papers for years. And I remember David coming to grief somewhere on his bicycle, and Beryl Pears did the rest of his paper route for him because she figured he shouldn't be doing that in the state he was in. And people were very kind. There was a mill behind what was the Canine Country Club kennels on down across from Bennett Road, the old Clapham house. And there was a mill in behind there. The Fields had a mill on the creek. And we used to go fishing in the mill pond periodically. Never caught much, but we fished. Matheson Lake was better for catching trout.
Yes.
Anyway, it was a nice childhood. I'm glad I had it. I wish my great granddaughter had the freedom of the area like I did. She's 10. She should be.
I know.
She's also an only, and you don't send the onlys off as easily as you send a gang.
No, and she'd like to go to Whitty's, and she'd like the stairs to be fixed. Yes.
Yes, it's a long hike around unless you know somebody she can cut through. And nobody lets the local kids
No.
cut through the backyard. Pity.
Too many trees. I was speaking with someone the other day and have come down in the park down that way, and paths are not easy.
So thanks, Isabel and Jenny. You've covered a lot of territory. Before we ask if anyone else has questions, I just want to know, tell me some of your memories of Metchosin Day.
The first one, John Waterman and Alvin Helgeson organized it with the help of their wives. And it was down on the field immediately beside the Devonian Bridle Trail. And you'd have been, what, 14, 15?
Something like that. John remembers going to help Dad with the wood, because I think
Yeah,
Dad supplied the
provided-
holder.
Yes. And Jim Campbell came over from Saturna and showed them how to barbecue
Oh,
the lamb, because Saturna had learned from an Argentinian freighter crew that was stranded off Saturna for months, and Saturna sort of adopted them and helped them, and they showed them how to barbecue it in the South American way. And yeah, we used to provide the alder for smoking,
And I
and the
remember,
Albert Head ratepayers ran the food after the first year or two.
Yeah.
I don't suppose they were that organized the first year.
no, because I remember hearing that they wanted to put the fire underneath the trees in the shade, and Father having a fit and made them
Yes.
move it out. You're not
Yeah.
having a fire underneath those trees
Yeah.
all day
Burn
long.
down the neighborhood,
So-
yes.
They had to move it out.
Yeah.
I cannot remember not knowing everybody at the picnic.
Yeah.
Till probably in the, I don't know, mid 80s, late 80s. And then it was like, who are these people and what are they doing at our picnic? Because I don't know them. But no, it was, and then it moved.
Yes, and then when Metchosin became a municipality, it moved to the municipal grounds and became a much bigger affair.
Yes.
And now I don't know a tenth of the people at Metchosin now.
thank you. And Lori, will you take over the questions now?
Wait, we have nothing in the chat, so why don't
Oh,
we just,
okay.
we can just open up the floor if anybody has any questions or comments or memories, feel free to jump in.
I would just like to say I'm Eleanor Creaser and I married Ray Creaser. And I remember Isabel was the very first person I met when I moved out to Metchosin. I quit my job and was painting in the house, and there was a knock on the door and she introduced herself. And I remember she brought a stack of, as a wedding present, she brought a bundle of chocolate brown towels that lasted for years and years and years. And I always remember that because I was feeling very strange and, you know, I didn't know a soul. It was a different community. And I've always treasured that memory that she was the first person I met. And she also invited me down to her place very early on. And I guess a group of them in Fiverr's group, they taught me how to spin. So I still have a spinning wheel. I want to get back to spinning, but that was way back when. And there was a little group that's how I got to know the community. And it was through her introducing me to various ladies around the community.
Thank you, Eleanor.
I remember a tale about Eleanor. Our youngest went to Hans Helgeson School, and he was his father's son. It took him forever to get home. Finally, I lowered the boom. You're home by 4 o'clock tomorrow or the sky will fall. It was 4 o'clock tomorrow and no mark. 5 o'clock tomorrow and no mark. By this time, I'm ready to skin the kid. And he arrived home and, oh, it's Mama, it was so, I had a terrible time. Here he is, filthy dirty. He said, Patty's cottage burned down and Mrs. Creaser got me to get through the window and rescue the cat. And I've been helping with the fire. Rats.
I remember
An
that.
impeccable excuse. Saved again.
I should have phoned you. I guess we were too involved.
That's all right. He explained himself well enough to avert disaster. The day I'm going to kill him, he's got an iron tight alibi.
Tell about the time my other brother, John, had a paper route because being an early riser and you got to give him something to do. And he got brought home by the.
Oh, yes. There's nothing at 5 o'clock in the morning having your 12-year-old stand there and saying the police brought me home. That wakes you up in a hurry. Somebody had escaped from William Head and they thought that he might hijack a paper boy's bicycle and escape. So they'd taken the paper boys home and told them that father, not mother, was to take them on the paper route. So father got up and drove the paper route. But he can certainly wake you up in a hurry.
They all got their papers from the corner store,
Yes.
which at that point was Jenkins, I think.
Yes.
Wasn't Bly's.
No.
Mhm. No more questions? Well, thank you very
Hi,
much.
hi, Sandy here. One more,
Oh, good,
one more.
good,
squeeze
good.
in One more, Helen.
Good.
Hello, Isabel
Hi.
and daughter. When you said Jenkins and you were talking about the Metchosin days, did you remember Ron organizing the music for the early Metchosin days? They would have arrived on the scene
I don't
in
remember.
the 70s.
But music being in the first one or two, but after that, yes. And yes, I got to really appreciate Ron Jenkins. He and I drove for a lot of field trips and I got to know him while we waited for the children to view this fish at Goldstream or whatever. And
Oh, nice.
very interesting man. A great fund of knowledge.
Yeah, he was a nature lover for sure, and a birder. Yeah, as well as a musician and a taxidermist,
We
and
all know the
on it
music.
goes.
Yes. Yes, a sort of a Renaissance man.
Yeah. Well, yes, he wasn't your run-of-the-mill guy.
The chosen doesn't attract
that's
those.
nice.
No.
Thanks.
Well, I think we're off again.
Any other questions or comments or memories?
No, but again, I would like to suggest that you have Ray Creaser as one of your next senior interviews.
What do you say to that, Ray?
I also went to Rocky Point School
Yeah,
in 1940. And, the Army was there too in Churchill.
mhm.
He remembers the bags of flowers because he told me
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yes,
But that's a
it
really
actually happened. Yeah.
The bags of flour landed very close to the school also.
Yeah.
They tear gas on Army with in the ball
Oh,
field at the side and accidentally dropped into school.
oh, great.
With the tear gas dropped onto school, the Army officers could see the problem he rushed over to the schoolyard. I was outside along with the kids.
Wind was blowing the wrong way too.
And the teacher was inside. She didn't know what was going on. Army officer hustled us all into the school and say, stay there. And he went outside until the tear gas had disappeared. And
Goodness.
he managed says, okay to go out.
Yeah.
Right after about 10 minutes. And we
We
studied the wind and the tear gas cleared our eyes. It was stinging.
Yeah.
Oh, there's tears in our eyes. That was my first experience with tear gas.
I would hope it's your last. Oh, we didn't get tear gassed. We just got bombed with flour.
But like you say, our kids were I grew up like you did. We roamed. I grew up in the Mount Douglas Crossroad, and you could roam anywhere. And Ray was the same way. And our kids were, like Jenny said, a bit less, but still they roamed. But I don't think kids just roamed like we did.
Oh,
No, when when the tracks were still tracks, Mom would send us out as get the kids out of my hair, go find a Christmas tree. So we would go down the tracks with an axe and two brothers and a sister. And of course, the first one we saw wasn't good enough. There were some from my mom's camp of, we like a tree you can hang stuff on. And my father's, it must be symmetrical. And so we'd walk down as far as Matheson Lake and then decide that the perfect tree was there, but we were not hauling it all the way back. And we'd come back and pick the first one we saw, but we had a nice hike and got out of her hair for a while. But that was when you were allowed to harvest a tree on the side of the tracks. Nobody cared. No.
I remember too, your mom had, Isabel, you had real candles. I was very impressed with that.
yeah.
You probably still have the little
I have the
bracket.
candles, but we have a fake tree. We had to get a fake tree when Max started being sensitive to the smell of the real ones. But
No, I remember the first Christmas after I was married, Mom's gift to my husband was a set of candles and holders. And of course, he'd grown up with a very groomed tree and was appalled by this and didn't believe that it wasn't burned. I still have them in the Christmas box, but again, we have a fake tree too,
Yeah.
so.
I think you had a bucket of water beside it or
the
something.
first year I certainly did.
Yeah. No. I remember seeing that at Carlsfeld.
Yes.
Christmas Eve.
Well, I so enjoyed hearing this conversation today. It was so interesting and full of just beautiful memories. Thank you, everyone, too, who came and participated. Thank you, Isabel and Jenny, for
You're most welcome.
Thank you
doing
for
that.
having us.
Yeah, and Ray, I'll be in touch. Yeah.
We know where you live.
Then you start thinking about who you pass the buck to.
Yes, then you can do tag next.
Yeah.
And I just let you know our next event is next week, June 15th. We have an RCMP corporal who's going to be talking about some of the scams there that are targeting people. And we have some art collage classes coming up, and there's still, it's a free classes and there's still space. If anybody wants to register, you can just call the center or go to our website for more information. So that's it for me. And thank you, Helen, too, for helping to co-pilot with me. It was our first one, and it was nice to have your support and all the support of you guys as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, and thank you.
Bye, everyone. And Jenny, I'm going to get you to put end record, and then we are officially done.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much, Isabel.
Bye,
It's
everyone.
so interesting. Thank you.
It's kind of fun.
I think.
I don't know.
Excuse me while I peer.
Hope to see you